Hello and welcome to this short video where we will discuss about a very important concept called as time value of money. To give you some base, think of it. If I were to give you an option to get 10,000 rupees right now vis-a-vis 10,000 rupees at end of the year, which one would you choose? You would obviously choose rupees 10,000 right now because you could invest it and make more money out of it. Or at the least you could buy more stuff right now with that 10,000 rupees than what you can do after 1 year. And with this background, let's understand some basic calculations of time value. Question 1. Future value from a present value. Finding future value. In this question, we have rupees 10,000 invested at the rate of 10%. Okay. Now the question is, how much will it become after 5 years? So when we have a question, the first thing to understand it clearly, let's convert it into a timeline. So let's make a timeline which is for 0 to 5 years. 0 is the starting point and 5 is the ending of 5th year. You have rupees 10,000 which is invested. The reason why I have put this 10,000 as a negative value is to showcase that this money is going away and the growth rate is 10%. The question is, what is the amount that we will have after 5 years? Now, let's kind of name all of these things. The money that we are putting in right now is something that we call as present value. It's there right now. The rate of interest would be rate. The time period, we will call it as number of periods, N per for short, N per, NPER. And this would be the future value. You could do it mathematically using the future value formula. Over here, we are going to focus on calculation using an Excel sheet. So let's go to an Excel sheet and calculate. So in this Excel sheet, what function that we are going to use is the future value function, and we will key in the data as it is asked. So you type in is equal to FP, open the bracket, it will ask you for some data, just key in the data as asked. So we have rate 10%, N per, which is 5. Do we have a PMT in this case? A regular series of investment? No. So we put that as 0. And next we put what I'm going to put in right now, present value minus 10,000. There's no need to type because there is no PMT. And as you enter, you get an answer which is 16,105. This is the amount of money that you will have at the end of 5th year. Simple, right? Just go to the, just press equal to and type whatever is missing. Let's solve some more questions to get it clear. In this case, we'll do the reverse. We have a future value and we want to find a present value. So the question is that you need rupees 10 lakh after how much time? After 8 years. And whatever I'm going to invest right now is expected to grow at the rate of 9%. So you have three critical values. Amount needed 10 lakh. What is this? The future value. 8 years, the number of periods, and per rate 9%. What do we need to find out? Present value. Let's quickly make a timeline of it. You have 8 years and you need 10 lakh after 8 years, and the rate of interest is 9%. We need to know what should we invest now. Let's go to our Excel sheet once again quickly and do this calculation. What function are we going to use this time? We will start using the PV function because PV is what we need to find. So PV, open the bracket and you have data being asked by the system. So we key in 9% and then we key in the N per, which is 8 years, right? And always make sure that you key in as asked. Remember, what is being asked is folded down there. You don't have a PMT, so you skip it and then you go to the future value, which is given as 10 lakhs. So you type in 10 lakhs. You have to type in without any commas straight away number. Type once again does not make any sense because there is no preemptive. So that's all. You got to close your bracket and press the enter key, and you will have your answer. Now you see this number is coming as a negative number. The reason being you have to invest this amount. Remember the convention, the money going away right now has to be shown as negative and the money coming into your pocket has to be shown as positive. So this means that rupees 5,01,866 rupees is to be invested, which will grow at the rate of 9%, so that after 8 years you have rupees 10 lakh. Well, many times we had cases where compounding does not take place annually. In such cases, we will need to have ANPR and rate according to the period of compounding. Let's take an example. Let's see a question. The same question once again. But with a little bit of difference. You still need rupees 10 lakhs and you need them after 8 years and the rate of interest is still 9%, but the compounding instead of happening every year is happening every quarter. Now question to think. The answer, the amount required, will it be less? Will it be more? Think of it as we put this question on the timeline. You have the same 8 years, you need the same 10 lakh, the rate of interest is given as 9% and you need to find out the present value. But this 9% is not going to compound annually, this 9% is going to compound quarterly, which means that we will have to take a quarterly ANPR and a quarterly rate. So if you have 8 years, the number of quarters that you would have is 8 into 4. And if the annual rate is 9% compounded quarterly, the quarterly rate is 9% by 4. The important thing to understand and think is 9% by 4 the same as 9% per annum? No, because compounding is happening quarterly. Annually, it should be more than 9%. Okay, so we will discuss on this little later. However, right now we have a quarterly rate at 9% by 4 and a quarterly ANPR at 8 into 4. What has happened is we multiplied ANPR by 4 and divided the rate by 4. Now to solve this, let's quickly look at the Excel sheet once again. What are we going to use? We are going to use the same PV function is equal to PV open bracket, and the rate of interest is still going to be 9% but divided by 4. The good thing is you can do all these calculations right inside the function, so you don't have to calculate separately and key in the data. 8 is the ANPR, but now you are going to make it 8 into 4. You could also put directly the multiplication 32 if you wish to. You put the future value as 10 lakh. Remember, one single number without any commas. Close the bracket, no PMT, no type, enter, and the answer that we have is 4,90,652. So what is it? Is it lesser? Obviously less. Right? So our answer without compounding was 5,01,866 and now our answer is 4,90,652. This is the magic of compounding more number of times. Right? So higher the number of compounding periods, lesser the PV required. One more question on compounding. Let's say you have rupees 10,000 invested at the rate of 10% per annum compounded monthly. How much will it become after 5 years? Now you have a monthly compounding, so you will need a monthly rate and a monthly ANPR. Quickly get to the timeline. You have 0 to 5 years. What are we going to do? We are going to multiply the ANPR and divide the rate, because we want to find out the future value. So we say that our monthly rate is going to be 10% divided by 12. Please note that that means that the annual rate could be actually higher than 10% because of the compounding effect. And the NPER would be 5 into 12. Actually solving this, what function are we going to use? We are going to use the fc function. Fc, open the bracket and key in the data as r 10%, comma. So divided by 12, NPER would be 5 into 12, or you could put straight away 60, whichever way you prefer. There is no PMT still. The present value is minus 10,000. So we do that, we close the bracket and we press enter. So what do we get? 16,453. This is the amount of money that we will have at the end of 5th year or at the end of 60th month.
We have been talking about PMT and type for quite some time, and we have been leaving it blank. Now, in this part of the session, let's introduce PMT. Well, to give an example of PMT, any cash flow which occurs again and again in equal intervals is a PMT. For example, insurance premium is a PMT, occurs maybe every year, same amount. Loan EMI is a PMT, occurs every month, same amount. Your salary, your rent, mutual fund SIP, annuity, pension, loads of examples wherein equal amount of money either flows in or flows out. So PMT could be an inflow, PMT could be an outflow, right? So as long as it's equal amount, equal interval, we classify it as PMT. Now here, we're going to take some examples with PMT. Let's look at this question. If rupees 5,000 per annum is invested for 4 years, how much money will be accumulated if the rate is 11%? So the question tells us that rupees 5,000 per annum is invested every year. Now when we have this information, we got to think when in the year it is invested. Now generally, PMT, cash flow or inflow or outflow generally happen either at beginning of the period or end of the period. Let's again consider some examples. If you were to buy an insurance policy, do you first get an insurance policy and then pay the premium at end of the year? No. You first pay the premium in advance for the entire year. The same goes for any investment, be it mutual fund, SIP, be it recurring deposit, or anything else. Now, the beginning of the period cash flows are classified as type 1 cash flows, and end of the period are classified as type 0. Now let's have a closer look and let's take both the options. What if this 5,000 is invested at beginning and what if it is at end? So let's go with beginning first. Type 1 cash flow at beginning. Now, if you put 5,000 at beginning of each year, the timeline would look something like this. You have 4 cash outflows, minus represents outflow. You have 4 cash outflows at beginning of year 1, beginning of year 2. Remember the point 1 here represents end of year 1 as well as beginning of year 2. So your cash flows at beginning of year 1, beginning of year 2, beginning of year 3, and beginning of year 4. You have 4 cash flows and you want the money at the end of 4 years. So remember, when you have NPER as 4, your cash flows will also be 4. The question is, how much money will you be able to accumulate at the end of 4 years? The important thing to understand and look at is the last contribution of rupees 5,000. It is going to increase for one full year before you take it back. All other contributions would also increase by one additional year. So the contribution made at second year increases by 2 years. The contribution made at first year increases by 3 years, and the beginning of first year contribution has full 4 years to grow. Now let's contrast this with type 0 example. Assuming the same example with type 0, it would look something like this. Type 0 means at end. What happens is you do not invest anything at beginning of year 1. You invest money at end of each year. End of year 1, end of year 2, end of year 3, end of year 4. Now what would happen? How much money would you have at the end of year 4? Would you have more money in type 1 or would you have more money in type 0? Well, you can clearly see that in type 0, the last rupees 5,000 has got no time to increase in value. And each of the previous year's 5,000 is also invested for one less year. Right? So the first investment made at end of the year 1 grows only for 3 years. The next grows for 2 years, the next grows for 1 year, and the last does not grow at all. Each investment has lost one full year of growth. So obviously, type 0 will give you a lesser future value. Quickly, let's calculate and look at if our assumption is right. First, calculating at type 1. So let's find future value, bracket open, key in the rate, which in given case is 11%. And how many years do we have? We have 4 years. And now we have a PMT. You have minus 5,000 as PMT. Do we have a PV? No. When we said N is 4 and PV is 5,000, but PMT is minus 5,000, we say that 5,000 is invested 4 times. You don't have to put a PV separately. And type as 1 because the money is being invested at beginning. Answer comes to 26,129. At type 0, what would be our answer? One thing that we for sure know that the answer is going to be less than this. The rate is still going to be 11%, NPAR is still going to be 4, and PMT is still going to be minus 5,000. But rate is not going to be the same. And that will change your answer. It comes down to 23,548.66. That's the difference. Type 1 is over type
2. Okay, so now we come to this diamond called as PMT, the item that we were leaving blank all the while. So we'll now understand what do you do with this PMT and what do you do with type, which also comes along with the PMT. Let's have an understanding, let's have a look at the question. You have rupees 10 lakh after 8 years. How much should you invest every year assuming the rate of interest is 9%? Now, this is a typical kind of question in the financial planning world. Many a times you won't have lump sum to invest, and hence what do you want to do? You want to invest some amount of money every now and then. So the question is, once again let's understand, rupees 10 lakh is required after 8 years, and the question is how much money, a installment of amount which is to be invested every year can I invest, which when growing at 9% could give 10 lakh. To give you perspective, a PMT could be a mutual fund SIP, a fixed amount of money invested every month. So you have a fixed amount, you have a fixed period. An insurance premium, which is more like an annual PMT. You have a fixed amount being invested at a fixed interval, which is a year. There could be many other examples of PMT. Rent could be PMT, salary could be PMT. There are any amount of money which flows equally and in equal periods could be PMT. Coming back to this question, let's try and plot a timeline. But there is one more thing that we need to define. We need to define the type as well. So let's define the type. You could have two different kinds of cash flows, type 0 cash flow and type 1 cash flow. Type 0 cash flow looks like something this. You need 10 lakh after 8 years, so your cash flows will happen at end of each year. An example of a kind of cash flow could be, say, salary. If you are working for a company, you would get salaries at the end of the period. You first work for 1 month and then you get salary. Or if you have put up a money for the purpose of recurring income in a bank deposit or something, you put the money at this time 0, and at the end of period 1 your cash flow will start, right? So there are certain cash flows which typically happen at the end of the period, but there are other kind of cash flows which typically happen at beginning of the period. So you could take 10 lakh by investing at end of each period, or you could also do that by investing at beginning of the period. Beginning of the period is type 1. So at any given point you will have only two types, either type 0 or type 1. Type 0 represents that the cash flows are happening at end of each period, whereas type 1 says that the cash flows are happening at beginning of each period. An example, practical example would be an insurance premium, mutual fund, SIP, a recurring deposit, any kind of investment which you make, you do that in advance. So, for example, if you were to buy an insurance policy, you pay the premium right now for the next 1 year. Same for an SIP or a RD. So, most investments follow type 1, and hence, important thing to remember, when the question is not very clear as to what type of cash flow it is, we will apply a little bit of logic. For any investment, we will take type 1 as the default type, right? So when nothing is given, take type as 1. Now, moving forward and creating a timeline for both of them in particular.